Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the Knife Center, and welcome to Knife AQ number 59, the knife series where I answer all your questions, whether they're sharp or dull. This week, amongst other things, we're talking about some alternatives to the CRKT CEO, talking about the finer points of some rust-resistant steels, and should you use a Kukri for bushcraft. Let's get into it. All right, thank you everyone for all of your questions for this series. If you're unfamiliar with it, what you want to do, if you want a chance to have one of your questions featured in a future episode, you just leave that question down in the comments section below. First question this week comes from Stone Russell. That's a nice rugged name right there.
Indeed.
What's up, Stone? Hello, David. I work on a cattle farm. I told you, he's a cowboy.
Math checks out.
And was wanting a knife to handle my work better. It needs to cut heavy rope, zip ties, horse hooves, horse wire, hay bale ties, and of course, steak, of course. The look of this knife matters as well, since I don't want to be caught carrying a bright colored knife on the ranch. Price range would be $120 or under. Any help would be greatly appreciated. I can absolutely give you a recommendation well under the price. And because you're a cattleman and you're working with horses, I mean, my mind immediately went to the cold steel Vaquero. This is the XL Voyager sized Vaquero blade. 85 bucks, 5.5 inch recurve blade, AUS-10 steel, stonewash finish. Not gonna get, there's not gonna be any kind of looking down upon this knife. Except for maybe being too much in your ranching scenario. I will say though, might be a little too big for you, so we'll tone it down just a little bit. Not too much though. We'll go with the standard sized Voyager here with the 4-inch clip point blade for about $68. Crazy tough, crazy hard working knives, the Voyager series. The handles offer enough girth that you're going to be able to get a nice solid hold on them, even if you're wearing rancher's gloves or leather gloves, whatever you need for your working job. Solid hold there. Very strong triad lock here at the back. Works exceptionally well. Works just like a lockback, but even stronger and should last even longer. And then when it comes to the blade shape, the reason I leaned towards this one over, the Vaquero up there is, not being a rancher or farmer myself, I do look to some of my farming friends who, one of my best family friends carries a Buck 110 all the time on his farm to this day. Not quite the Buck 110 blade, you don't have quite as aggressive of a clip point on this guy, but similar vibes for sure. Hard working, the AUS-10 is very solid stuff. The stonewash finish is gonna hide scuffs and scratches a little bit better than a brightly colored finish. You've got enough thickness there to stand up to heavier work, but you've got a good slicing profile thanks to the full flat grind. Just super solid and one of the hardest working knives, honestly, you can get at this price range. All right, next question comes from Tim Canepa. Greetings, DCA. I am ready to upgrade my bushcraft knife. While browsing about it, I stumbled on a few videos of Kukri knives for bushcraft. I would love to know your thoughts on this, and if your blessings be upon such a notion, which Kukri would you would recommend? Thanks, brother, sir. Sure, I'd love to talk about this. So for me personally, I tend to think of a bushcraft knife as being a little bit smaller, but that's not to say it can't work. So I'll show this guy right here. This is the Condor K-tact Kukri knife. Comes in about 133 bucks. And I look to examples like History Channel's, or Histories, I guess they're not officially the History Channel anymore, but their Alone survival show. Season 1, Alan Kay, the winner, carried a Condor heavy-duty machete, or heavy-duty Kukri. That was his knife that he took as part of the one of 10 tools he could bring and survived on it. Of course, in that case, we get into a little bit of a difference philosophically between survival knives and bushcraft knives. Survival knives, of course, have to be like a one-tool option, whereas bushcraft tool set consists of many different things. But this definitely did everything he needed to do, from chopping to splitting to finer work like carving traps for snares and triggers and stuff like that. So it can certainly do the job, and there's nothing to say that this can't be part of your bushcraft system too, in addition to a smaller knife. Definitely is going to work. This k-tact version is essentially a signature version for Allen K that they put out after the show came out. It's got some upgrades like a micarta handle, some flared tubes there, so you could do some lashing stuff if you wanted to. Nice crown section here at the front, so if you were going to use that as a draw knife, it'd be more comfortable. And also if you're using it to baton, it's going to be a little bit easier on the stick you're hitting it with. You also have a little section here right near the tip that's crisp, so you can use it for a fire steel. Personally, this starts to get into an area where I tend to think very conservatively, or tend to think about being very careful with a kukri, because it's like an F-16 fighter, I like to say. Any aviation folks out there know the shape of the F-16 is inherently unstable in flight. The only thing keeping it level is essentially the computer, and it is that way because it helps it to be more nimble in flight. The same thing is kind of true of the kukri. Its center of balance is off in order to increase its effectiveness. But as such, it handles much differently than a standard knife. So be careful when you're swinging one of these, and be careful if you are using this section out here near the tip, because that's a long way away, and the last thing you want to do, of course, is mess up your fingers with any kind of mechanical injury or a cutting injury, whatever. But it's a solid tool. 1075 steel, I believe, which is very tough. Convex grind right down to 0, so it's very durable and very choppy as well. So yeah, it's definitely going to work for your bushcraft stuff, whether standalone as more of a survival bushcraft thing or as part of a wider system. Me personally, I would say don't get too much larger than this for your bushcraft kukri. It's got about a 10-inch blade here. Beyond that, it gets more and more unwieldy for doing things like the finer carving. I mean, my favorite kukri that I own is my Becker Reinhardt kukri, but it's a few more inches long, and I wouldn't feel comfortable using that as much for the smaller stuff. There could be an argument to be made, I will say. I know I'm going off on plenty of tangents here. You could go a little bit longer if it was a thinner blade, like some of the cold steel kukri machetes, but those are really like kukri-shaped machetes rather than actual kukris, which tend to have thicker blades. Maybe you could go a little bit bigger on a thinner bladed one, because they'd still be, you'd be fighting less weight. But to bring this question home and hopefully tie a neat bow on it, if I were to pick a kukri or a kukri-like object for me personally as part of my bushcraft tools, or even as a one-tool option survival tool, I'd probably go with this right here. It's the K-Bar kukri, sorry, no, I'm looking at the wrong tab. The Combat Kukri from K-Bar. Comes in about $84, US made, 1095 CV carbon steel, and the blade here is shorter, about 8.5 inches. So with this kind of length and a slightly thinner blade stock, it looks like it's probably somewhere around 1/8 of an inch before the coating is applied. Obviously doesn't have the same kind of chopping power, but it is more neutrally balanced. It's a bit more nimble, which is why I would personally choose it, because I'm not as much of a bad mofo as Allen K is. I stick with what I'm going to be a little more comfortable with. And when you choke up right above the finger guard here, it balances pretty nicely. So the finer work is going to be significantly easier for me to do. If I were doing it, I'd probably actually dull this section here at the back just a little bit, because I have large fingers and I wouldn't want to accidentally kind of cut myself if I was choking up above that. The finer stuff is going to work. The tip is going to be fairly easy to use given the size, and you do have a little bit of hacking capabilities. Got a nice comfortable handle. It's rubber in this case, so you've got some shock absorption there. Maybe not as good for the long-term carving, because that can actually, increase the likelihood of blisters, but that is the trade-off you're going to deal with. Made in the USA. Solid little guy right here. So I don't know if that's my blessings on that particular knife or not, but that's kind of where I would lean if I were adding a bushcraft kukri to my arsenal. Hope that helps. All right, next question comes from Mark Villano. Hey David, I'm looking for a really good flipper in the lighter 3-inch neighborhood for under $200. Something a bit more premium than the CRKT CEO. But that's the style I'm targeting, so nothing beefy or tactical, no karambits. I'd like one with premium steel, ball bearings, maybe a variety of handle options, flexible on grind and blade style, Also a frame or axis lock and a deep carry clip would be nice, but no front flippers. So I'm not going to get you a frame lock or an axis lock with my recommendation, but the clear upgrade, which I've been waiting to hit the market to answer your question, is the new Quake and Air Mini from Boker Plus specifically. Check out how similar these guys are in their profile. The CEO flipper is a little bit larger, yes, but just barely. Both of these knives have those nice, slender, straight-backed blades, Quaken style blades. And some folks were wondering, like I've said, that the CEO flipper has some Quaken DNA in it, and some people kind of raised eyebrows at that. It really makes sense when you put this Quake and Air Mini next to it. Similar blade styles, very narrow handles. The blades fold completely into the handle. All you've got is the flipper tab sticking out on both. And you do have a deep carry pocket clip on the Boker and on both of these. And you also have a lanyard point here at the back, which is something you don't get with the CEO flipper. But these are great. They can be had for as little as like $65, depending on the version you choose, because there are several different handle and blade finishes available. You've got ball bearings in the pivot. You've got great flipping action. I mean, this is the guy. Significantly less than your $200 max, I will say. VG10 steel, which there's a debate over whether that you could call that premium in this context or not. It's definitely more premium than the AUS 8 on the CRKT. It's also more than twice the price. This particular one I think is about $90 with the black G10. But you can get titanium and Cocobolo, some other stuff as well. And these feel nicer than a $90 knife, even if you don't get a powder metallurgy steel here. But definitely check those guys out. It is the more premium CEO flipper we've been waiting for. All right, next question comes from Tristan Dowd. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry. I don't know how your name's pronounced. I'm very sorry. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought LC200N steel cannot rust. As in, it's chemically not possible since all the carbon in the steel was replaced by nitrogen. Cool. So I have a Spyderco here with LC200N steel. This is the Caribbean, about $190 right now. And when describing this steel on knives, I used to say it was a rust-proof steel. I have since seen that kind of disproven in a way. And the reason may not shock you when I say why. It's all because of Joe Flowers, our good friend over there at Condor, Tops, etc. Artisan Cutlery recently too, actually, which is interesting and very fun.
Boy, put him and Russell in a room together.
No, the universe would implode. There's probably several black holes anytime if they've met in person anytime so far. But anyway, Joe had one of these knives, a Spyderco Caribbean, and he dropped it at one point. And if I'm remembering the story correctly, it was a stream bed not too far from his house, I guess. Could not find it. It was lost. He thought it was gone forever. But he wound up finding it about 9 months later on the stream bed still. And the knife hadn't rusted away. The knife hadn't rusted at all. But there was a little bit of a patina, a little bit of coloration on the surface of the steel now that wouldn't clean away with just regular cleaning. So for that reason, that's why when I'm describing this guy now, I say it's essentially rust-proof or virtually corrosion-proof. In that technically it may not be at the utmost 99.999th percentile of situations, but it's so rust-proof that you're not going to have to ever honestly really worry about it. If you are worried about it to that degree, I think Spyderco's H1 steel, it's not their steel, but they use it frequently, is even more rust-proof than the LC200N. You don't get the same edge retention as a result, though. So that is why I describe it as virtually corrosion-proof, because I keep learning as we go. So I try to incorporate that as I talk about stuff. So.
And Joe Flowers is just a walking torture test for knives, isn't he?
If anyone's going to cause something to fail, he'll find the way. And for that reason, we need to keep him around as long as possible.
Can we clone him?
Probably break the equipment.
You would.
I don't think that would work. All right, that brings us now to the lightning round for today. First question, Tribal 6897. My EDC is a Benchmade Bugout, and I really like it, but there's only one thing that's missing, a glass breaker. Is there a slim, light pocket knife with a glass breaker? There's a few actually, but you don't have to look far. I think for your replacement, check out the aluminum handled bailout. Essentially a slightly spun off version of the Bugout. You can see the handle similarities right there. The Grevery versions don't have it, but the aluminum versions do. You got a glass breaker there on the bail at the back. About $221 for these. You've got an M4 blade, Tonto, but it's not so like obnoxiously Tonto that it is only good for tactical stuff. It's very useful as an EDC. I've carried one myself. The aluminum handles are very satisfying and is very close in form factor to the knife you know and love right now. You just get that little extra feature you're looking for. So that's the guy. Check that out. Next question comes from Kanukaru. Hey, how are you? I'm good. I have a question about knife steel, specifically CTS XHP. I've got 2 cold steel knives, an American Lawman, I have one right here, and a Code 4 drop point in CTS XHP, and I see that both those knives now come in another steel. What's that about? Are my blades inferior? Yeah, I've got an American Lawman right here. They now come in S35 VN. Are your blades inferior? No, absolutely not. They're not identical, but the reason they switched away from that steel was not because of the performance. In this particular case, it had more to do with like supplier issues and being able to get the quantity of steel that they wanted from Carpenter, the company who makes XHP, versus Crucible, who makes S35. They were able to get more of what they needed at the time. And this is, essentially, maybe not common knowledge, but it's stuff that's out there. I'm not necessarily like divulging inside secrets. You can find this reported in a few places out there. So yeah, don't worry about it. Your steel is great. Just a little bit different than the S35 right here. Side note, we'll pause the lightning round for a moment. Lightning round off. A couple weeks ago, Seth and I were talking about, or we're answering a question for a guy who wanted a kind of do-everything knife that did his like food prep, tactical, EDC, and outdoor stuff. And a lot of people, within a certain size range like this knife, and a lot of folks were kind of indignant that we didn't mention the American Lawman. And normally these sorts of things, you guys can leave your suggestions in the comments at any time, no problem. But it came up a lot. And rather than address every one of those guys individually, the reason neither of us really considered this knife is because the handles are fairly thin. They're a bit on the thinner side. So a little bit, not what we would be looking for an outdoorsy knife where you might have to be doing a lot of carving. It'd be fairly uncomfortable. The Voyager would have been a great choice, but the blade length was longer than our guy was talking about in that particular question. So no bias, no need to throw that out there like a lot of you guys were. Just didn't fit the answer. So cool knife though. All right, resume lightning round, for whatever that means. Justin Lindsay, it's a funny comment, I laughed. Kershaw Leek, why? Well, to take a stab at your question, they're slim, classy, collectible, because there's many variants of it. They're affordable, they're made in the USA, and ultimately, it's a shape that's gonna cover 99% of what everyone needs in a daily pocket knife. So maybe that's why.
Or Ken Onion.
What about it?
It's his design, isn't it?
Well, it is his design, yes.
Yeah.
And it's a Ken Onion design, which is cool. Not that that is a selling point in and of itself necessarily, but he knows what he's doing, and it shows in a knife like this. So that's why. Anyway, next question. 21 Beast from the East says, best way to clean a knife with a bunch of tape residue and adhesive gunk from opening boxes. So we've talked about this a little bit before. There's a lot of stuff that can work, like solventy things like WD-40 or acetone are gonna work, Goo Gone, people like that. Even stuff like mineral oil or whatever you oil your pivots with can work pretty well. Score another one for mineral oil, I'm a big fan. But something a lot of people are carrying nowadays more than ever before, hand sanitizer. Alcohol base on these guys, especially if you've got like a liquid spray like this guy, can do a pretty good job on, spray it on your blade, and it's gonna break down that adhesive just a little bit. Works pretty well. All right, finally, we come to our most serious question of the day, which comes from Chris Gonzalez. If Iron Man was rocking a folding knife, what knife do you think he would carry? I think he wouldn't carry a folder. I think he'd carry an OTF, like a Combat Troodon from Microtech. And the reason I mentioned this model in particular is not because this one's all black, but I do remember, we don't have it anymore, but we had a version of this at one point with some very Iron Man-y colors going on, some like red and apocalyptic bronze. Pretty cool. And you have to imagine, like, coming out of his suit, you'd have something like an OTF, not a common folder for the plebes. Be something more like this, I think, anyway.
You'd probably make it sentient, too.
Probably. It'd be a smart OTF, Bluetooth enabled or something. I don't know. But anyway, that's all the time we have for today. Make sure to leave your questions down in the comments, especially some of your most serious questions. Running a little lean on those guys. Want to have some fun answering your questions. If you want to get your hands on any of these comments, or any of these comments.
Huh? Okay, we're running low on comments.
If you want to get your hands on any of these knives, there will be links in the description to take you over to KnifeCenter.com. And make sure you sign up for our Knife Rewards program so that you can earn some free money to spend on your next knife when you buy one of these knives today. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center, signing off. See you next time.
Sentient knife.
Sentient knife.